Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to ask everybody to take their seats, and you can start your meal, continue your conversations. We have a full agenda today, though, so we're going to get going. My name is Joel Brennan. I am not Greg Marcus, who usually is the person to chair these meetings. Greg happens to be out of town this week, so unavailable, so I am stepping in to chair this meeting. As I think most of you know, a lot of our conversation today will be, or a lot of our meeting will be a conversation with our Mayor Chevy Johnson. I've been joking with people that I'm a big fan of this online series with Zach Galifianakis, Between Two Ferns, if anybody's ever seen it. It's pretty enjoyable to watch. I think we have maybe a couple little, maybe they're not ferns, we have something in between us on the table here. I'm not sure we'll have as many laughs today because a lot of the subjects are sobering, but like with everything that we do, we want to make sure that everybody walks away well informed today and more engaged in what we're doing. So we're going to start today, I get a chance to introduce my friend Shaitania Brown, who's the president and CEO at Employ Milwaukee. As I said, a lot of the conversation today is going to be on some significant topics that are happening, serious topics that are happening at the city. But what Shaitania and Employ Milwaukee work on are really workforce development issues. And she's going to talk a little bit today about a program that they're doing at Employ Milwaukee for the youngest among us and preparing them for what the future looks like. We all know the importance of creating a strong talent pipeline in our community. Shaitania and her colleagues at Employ Milwaukee spend their time focusing on creating alignment between the changing economy and the region's labor force. Specifically, Employ's ability to address innovative workforce training for disconnected youth has presented great opportunity for the future of Milwaukee's talent pipeline. Their ability to work with youth as young as 10 years old is a critical piece to building and creating an equitable future workforce. Shaitania has been with Employ Milwaukee for 17 years. In 2020, became the first female African-American leader of that organization. She began her career as a parole agent, and prior to joining Employ Milwaukee as president and CEO in 2020, she was administrator of the Division of Employment and Training at the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. So she also joins me in being a recovering state employee. She's going to speak today about a number of things related to what the Employ Milwaukee does, but also about Camp Rise, which began in 2022, works with some of the youngest and most impressionable future employees in our community. Welcome, Shaitania Brown.
I stay in denial about these glasses, but I actually got to put them on so I can see today. But thank you, Joel, and thank you, GMC, for inviting me to come and give a brief presentation on work that Employ Milwaukee does, but in particular our Camp Rise initiative that we launched this summer. So I wanted to just give you all a brief kind of background of who Employ Milwaukee is. Oftentimes people see us as your typical nonprofit, but actually Employ Milwaukee is one of 11 workforce development boards here in the state of Wisconsin. We're actually the largest workforce development board. We're governed by law. So the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is the law that governs us, and that act also determines who sits on our board. So our board is comprised of 51% business, and we receive federal resources to do the work that we do, and that's to be that coordinating, monitoring, partnering body for Milwaukee County. I'm here to talk about summer employment, but to point out, research continuously shows over and over again that summer employment positively impacts participant outcomes related to earnings as well as criminal justice. The mayor reached out to me on a Saturday this past summer and asked me about, how do you feel about working with 10-year-olds? Our programs typically start at the age of 14, and we go to age 24 for young people. And I'm like, 10-year-olds? What are we gonna do with 10-year-olds? But you know, as we thought about it, and when you look at all of the negative press that comes every time you turn the television on, it's something negative. I looked at it as an opportunity for us to do advocacy around bringing workforce development to youth younger than the age of 14. Because when we think about where young people are these days, many of them where programs start at age junior, senior year high school, there are a number of young people who's not even making it that far. And so if we can start this advocacy at age 10, we can change the narrative for many youth. Here, this gives you some stats. We run Earn and Learn, which started with Mayor Barrett way back when, in 2007, I believe. And this year, we had over 3,400 young people apply to be part of Earn and Learn. 1,300, a little over 1,300 actually completed their summer work experience, and we had over 119 work sites where young people were placed. They're placed at everything from community organizations, private business, to faith-based organizations throughout the community doing a multitude of jobs. These pictures here show you some of the locations, so there's no particular job that the young people do. They've done everything from being outside in construction to being indoors, working at art galleries, gyms, being in the community, computer labs, photography, just a multitude of experiences for young people. Camp Rise in particular, we came up with that name because we wanted young people to be able to rise out of their current circumstances. So we targeted and partnered with Milwaukee Public Schools, the City of Milwaukee, and Voices of the Elder, and had 200 young boys from Milwaukee Public Schools to participate in a 7-week program that followed the same time frame as the young people in Earn and Learn from June until August. Working throughout the city, we had a number of speakers come through. Breakfast was provided, transportation was provided to get the young people just as if they were going to school. We picked them up from their bus stop locations in the morning, and we dropped them off at noon at their bus stop locations. MPS made access available to them, breakfast and lunch. And we provided field trips throughout the community for young people to see what's possible for them in situations where things oftentimes are not necessarily looking too bleak. We were featured on CBS, Fox 6, WISN, and Spectrum News. I have a team currently in Charlotte, North Carolina at the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. Our program got chosen as a promising practice. So they are out there now presenting our program to NAWDP, which is our workforce a national association, to talk about workforce development opportunities for youth as young as 10. Here you see the mayor as well as former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes in pictures. You see the police chief. They came and they were speakers to all of the young people. The Bucks were very gracious at the end of the summer where they came and had a great end of the summer experience for the young people. Some of the evidence, we use evidence-based curriculum and enrichment workshops to promote teamwork, leadership, positive responsibility. They got out into the community. We took them to places that they've never even been before, and our goal this year is really to expand to, we did a survey and didn't realize that young people didn't know half of the city and what was available to them in our actual city. And so that's a part of our goal going forward, is to include additional field trips. We have judges who's now saying, hey, we want them to come spend a day with us in our chambers. We have Veolia Water who say, hey, we want them to see what's here in the port and what opportunities are available. And we're looking for more and more of those opportunities for young people. This here shows you a picture of just some of what the young people actually did during the summer. Here's some feedback that we got from both some of the young people and the parents. We had parents and moms in particular tell us that this was an awesome experience for their sons. It gave them an opportunity to earn money, but also be around positive engagement and positive influences for the summers. Campers, they used their stipends. They received a stipend as well. So that was something that in this whole workforce development piece, every Friday, the young people were able to get up to a $200 stipend via a gift card, Visa gift card. And BMO Harris Bank worked with us to provide those to the young people. And that was a highlight for them, but also BMO Harris Bank came in and did a financial literacy series to the young people to help them understand positive money management, how to read paychecks, what are you gonna do with your money, how about saving. What we learned also from the young people was many of them do not have savings accounts, and they came from households where savings was not a part of their everyday practice. So these are things that we're looking going forward to incorporate to youth as young as the age of 10 to put them on a pathway to success. We are in the process of an evaluation. We're surveying the participants and their parents on a quarterly basis to see, since the summer, how are the young people still remaining positively engaged? What are they talking about? What are they doing? Do we see any increase in their grades? Do we see any positive increases in their behavior? We're going to use that information to continue to reassess and evaluate the program. I am amazed at my team's ability to pull this together in 30 days. We did all of this. This was not a program or something we had planned out. Like I said, I got a call from the mayor on a Saturday, and it was like, can you do this? And so I had to think about it, but you never say no to the mayor. So, how you can help. So we are, of course, this is the point where we're looking for resources. Our goal is to expand the program to include young girls this upcoming summer. And so you can sponsor the cost of a Camp Rise camper, host a field trip. We're looking for opportunities to get our young people engaged in other spaces and places throughout the community, because we were really astonished by the survey where young people really didn't know of some of the landmarks here in our city. Present to the campers on careers. Like last year, we had a number of speakers come in our speaker series that we allowed. We welcome the opportunity to have folks come in and talk about careers, leadership, and other topics, because again, we're trying to instill in young people the opportunity, move them to that pathway of seeing what's possible versus what's impossible for them. And of course, to be a mentor. With the young women, Voices of the Elders was a group of elder Black men who came together to be mentors to these young people. We're looking to pull together the same thing for the young girls, a group of women to be mentors, to have those conversations with the young ladies about whatever is happening and how to show them mentorship and networking and things of that nature. So I had 5 minutes, and I have so much more I needed to say, but I welcome the opportunity. Thank you again, Joel.
Thank you, Shaitania. And again, I would just tell you, I think there was resources in this from the Milwaukee Public Schools. There were state resources or federal resources that came in through the ARPA grants. So anything like this that has those resources, it takes several things in order for it to work. It takes coordination, it takes resources, but it also takes on-the-ground partners to be able to do this. And Shaitania and Employ Milwaukee are an example of an organization that's willing to kind of step out of their comfort zone to do things that are valuable for the community. And I think we all feel that call and that pull. So, and it's something that the mayor has taken with the Earn and Learn program, which has had success over its 15-year run, and look at it a little differently and look at different ways that we can try to inspire young people in our community. So I would thank you for that presentation, Shaitania, and thank you for the work. The next person who we're going to hear from briefly is Steve Zimmerman from Spectrum Nonprofit Services. For the last few months, we have talked about the Greater Milwaukee Committee and our strategic planning process. That's underway. You likely, all of you who are members should have received a link to a survey, and Steve will talk a little bit about that. The importance of hearing from you can't be underscored enough for us. And there's a lot of work going on with the staff. There's work externally going on in the community. But Steve and Spectrum Nonprofit Services have aligned with P3 Development to be our partners in that strategic planning process. So Steve is just going to give us a little bit of kind of a midpoint update of where we are and where things are going. So I would invite Steve Zimmerman to join me.
Thank you, Joel, and good afternoon, everybody. It's hard enough to follow Shaitania and then to talk about strategic planning. I can see the eyes glaze over. I'm here today to really ask and implore you to please complete the survey because we want your input as we think about the direction of GMC. I have the pleasure of partnering with Janine Edwards from P3 Development Group in this process. We are right now in phase 1. Where we have been reaching out and doing an environmental scan, seeing what other cities and other communities are doing, what has been successful out there and what hasn't, and also getting your input as to what should GMC focus on as we move forward. Our goal is to take all of this input in, and then we are working with a task force that is, you see up there, a planning team that will help us kind of review all of the data and begin to move us forward as to what are you all saying? And I can tell you just from the little bit that we have been doing, the answer is a lot. And so it's how do we prioritize what GMC's role and big goals will be in the coming years as we move forward. So as I mentioned, right now we are in phase one. Phase one is about community engagement. That is really being led by P3. Janine has been doing a lot of different interviews, and then we also have launched this member survey. Right now, it's been open since last week. We have 43 responses. There are a lot more members than that, and we would like all of your input. It is a mix. I'll be honest, that survey is a mix of, kind of forced ranking and things like that, and a fair amount of open-ended responses. And it's partly because we wanted to hear in your own words what you think GMC should be focusing on, so we can take that data out. This is one of the key ways that we are engaging members in this process. There will be further opportunities for engagement. There are focus groups and discussion groups, et cetera. But this is really a seminal moment for you to have your input into the strategic direction of this organization. You've all given your time, you've given your talents, you've given some of your financial resources to make GMC strong. Now, please lend your voice into what that direction should be. What is it that GMC will be doing going forward? So the survey is open now. It will be open through the rest of the week. We do ask, once again, that you go online and complete it, and we look forward to giving you further updates as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Steve did a good job of explaining the importance of that and the relevance. The only thing I would do is say thank you in advance for those who have already done this. I know there was a survey that was done by the group that was charged with finding Julia's successor. So there's data that we have that was taken within the last year or a little more than a year ago, and we shared some of that, and that has informed some of the questions we're asking. But I think we all know that the community isn't a static place, and we have all been changed. The community has been changed over the last few years, and so we're trying to make sure that we can use all of that data to inform where we're going, and we appreciate all of your input and insight into that. So I'm just going to provide you with a couple of GMC updates before we get to our headliner today. We recently welcomed Michael Wesley onto the GMC staff to assist with our Appraiser Diversity Initiative. Michael, where are you? There you are in the back room. Wave to everybody. Michael, he comes to us with excellent experience to push our efforts in the organization. He was one of the co-developers of the Community Within a Corridor. He's an ACRE alum, and he previously coordinated Mission Fuel at Cardinal Stritch. So we're happy to have him engaged and involved with us as we move forward. In other personnel news, Tony Pansiera. Tony is also sitting next to Michael. Tony will be leaving the GMC in the coming weeks to pursue a new opportunity at Milwaukee County as the Senior Equity Project Manager. Tony has been with the GMC for 6 years. He's a transplant to Milwaukee and has had a demonstrable and significant impact on Milwaukee in his time here, and I expect that will continue in his time with Milwaukee County. Under his leadership, MK United has transformed aspects of the community. He's brought together a great group of leaders and has just been a collaborator and a leader in our community. We appreciate the way that Tony leads with equity, which is exactly what he'll be doing in his new role. So I hope you will all join me in appreciating Tony. In another bit of personnel news, Rich Green will also be departing the GMC at the end of 2022. I think a lot of you know that Rich's career has spanned 20 years. His institutional knowledge around finance, HR, IT, overall office management will be missed, but his contributions have been strong throughout his career. He's committed to us that he will assist as necessary with the upcoming audit, and he's remaining in the area. Again, we wish both Rich and Tony only the best in the next steps of their personal journeys. Onto Forward 48. Just last week, Forward 48, we have explained to you, Forward 48 expanded in this fall cohort to not only include Milwaukee, but also representatives from the Madison and Dane County area and the Fox Valley. They had their a session last week at Lambeau Field with Mark Murphy. I mean, they may be invited back every week after the results that we saw last night. But Mark Murphy had volunteered to be part of this effort with us, invited all those people to come to Lambeau last week and shared some of his personal story with them, which has happened with 6 or 7 others. I think that the final chapter of this cohort happens this week. So that effort around Forward 48 and the Commons is something that continues to have impact in our community, but now we're trying to expand and include that impact statewide. So appreciate all of our partners, the home group, and all the partners who are a part of that effort. Scale Up Milwaukee finished up a 2-day boot camp at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, focusing on B2B sales strategy last week. About 15 entrepreneurs attended this 2-day session, which was the first that they had done, and a great springboard into what comes next. Scale Up is hosting Corey Nettles as the first Meet the Masters of 2023 on January 11th. Corey's success at Generation Growth Capital, his personal story, will be an ideal way for entrepreneurs to begin their New Year's business growth resolutions. Reach out to Elizabeth of our staff or ask Corey if you see him about how you can participate and how you can help contribute to that. Scale Up is also hosting a holiday party on December 15th, planning a unique way to provide about $8,500 in grants from JP Morgan Chase. Grant applicants should be Spark graduates or businesses with less than $1 million in revenue. Just a couple of things that are coming up. Tomorrow, we are hosting, and a number of you are potentially participating, with a group of people from the EU, political business people from the EU who are coming to Milwaukee. This is part of a Midwestern tour that they have done in Midwestern industrial cities about what's happening now and how those cities are transforming themselves. The tour is titled Transforming the Industrial Heartland, Regions of North America and Europe. So we will have people coming in. The mayor will be talking to them, a number of other of our partners in the community. They'll be touring areas like the Menominee Valley, the Harbor District. They'll be at the community in the corridor. So doing a number of things, and we're finishing up with them having a beer or two before we put them on the train back to Chicago. So they will get a real good view of what Milwaukee is doing and where we're going into the future. In addition, tomorrow evening, the Move Forward Milwaukee panel there's a discussion that will take place at Potawatomi. Registration has been out there. I think there are still some spots available. As the mayor and I are about to talk about, this is one of the defining issues for our community for the next several years. And so the better informed you can be, the more you can be active participants in this as we get into the upcoming legislative session, the better we are all going to be. So we would invite you to take part in that as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce the mayor. We're going to step onto our chairs over here and have a conversation for a few minutes here. So I'm going to introduce Mayor Cavalier Johnson. He was elected as Milwaukee's first African-American mayor in a special election this spring, after serving just a few months as acting mayor upon Mayor Barrett's appointment to the ambassadorship to Luxembourg. Mayor Johnson has a long history of community outreach and assisting at-risk youth. Having grown up in the 53206 zip code, Cavalier Johnson understands firsthand some of the hardest challenges that Milwaukee faces, and he is from and of our community. Today's conversation will address his proposed strategies to overcome many of those challenges and answer questions that were submitted, many of them submitted by you. So with that, I will welcome Mayor Cavalier Johnson up to the hot seat with me. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I think that people are burning to know is, what's with the lapel pin? He's got if you haven't seen it, he's got a Batman lapel pin. I've seen some construction going on around City Hall. I didn't know if there's a bat signal that's going out. Just give us a little bit of that. We're going to talk about more serious topics, I swear, but we'll start with that.
Only if I could put a bat signal on City Hall, I probably would. No, I am a big Batman fan. There are a few things that have helped to get me where I am in life. And when I was a kid, I was sort of the runt of the litter, and my older brother and cousins, they didn't let me hang out with them. And so they'd all go do whatever they were doing. And it's probably a good thing I didn't hang with them, otherwise I probably would have been in trouble. But I was at home, and I was usually at home and alone and in a dark room by myself. And then I was, between 5 and 7 years old, and I saw Batman, the animated series. And I really connected with Batman and have been a lifelong Batman fan ever since I was 5 years old. And unfortunately, on Veterans Day, Kevin Conroy, who voiced Batman in that series and was so influential in my own life, passed away of cancer. So I'm taking this week to honor Kevin Conroy.
Good for you. Thank you. And personally, I would say when some of you may know, my brother-in-law is also named Kevin Conroy, who works at Exact Sciences. When I saw that headline come across, I knew it wasn't him, but I knew he shared a name with someone who's had a big influence on pop culture here.
Not that Kevin Conroy.
No, not that guy. All right, so we're a week removed from last Tuesday, still counting votes in some places. The results have been determined here in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee. We'll talk a little bit about just what your reaction was to the election results here in our state, and what impact potentially does that have on the work that we may be doing with the legislature moving forward?
Well, I mean, the election, especially in terms of the elections at the state level, right? That's where it really matters for us at the city. It produced a result that I think, I expected for a long time, and in terms of the governor's election, and then one that all of us, I think, could agree would happen regardless, just because of the state of legislative districts in our state, and that's that Governor Evers won re-election and will serve another 4 years, and Republicans will continue to control the legislature in both houses. That's not something that's crazy, that's out there, that folks could not have projected. That's certainly what happened. My thought is this, is that the governor had talked about in the campaign trail, it would be his highest priority to work to make sure that cities, to make sure that local governments have the resources that we need, and adjusting some of the funding formulas to make sure that that happens from the state level. I've had a number of conversations, you've had a number of conversations, the county executive and other business leaders have had a number of conversations with legislative leaders on the Republican side about the importance of making sure that we receive more dollars at the local level. And that's important because at the local level, that's where the rubber meets the road in Wisconsin. We are the ones that provide the services when it comes to police, when it comes to fire, when it comes to infrastructure on local streets. It happens all at the local level. And so we need the state to be the partner that it promised to be more than a century ago and return revenues back in a sufficient way, in a fair way, to local government so that we can continue to provide those services that our citizens, that the commuters who come into the city of Milwaukee, that our visitors who come from all over the country, all over the world to this city. I think some 20-25% of visits to the state of Wisconsin emanate here in this city. These are all services that each of them expect and deserve, and that's what I'm hoping that we'll be able to accomplish in this next term.
All right, one more question about voting. The turnout in Milwaukee was significantly lower than 2018. If you read the paper this morning, Milwaukee wasn't a total outlier. That happened in virtually all the municipalities in the county, but 36,000 fewer people. Some of that can be explained by a little bit of a population dip, and that 2018 was a little bit of an outlier in terms of an explosion in these midterm elections. But we had presentations. There are a number of people here who worked on a coalition trying to get as many people out to vote. What's your perspective on what that means in the city of Milwaukee, in our surrounding communities, and how do we change it? How do we encourage more people to participate in that process moving forward?
Yeah, I have gotten in trouble because of...
You won't get in trouble here. We're all friends here.
Because of my desire to see people go vote, and I'm not going to back away from that. I think that every single person who is eligible in this city should get up, should get out and go vote, should exercise their power, should go to a voting booth and cast a ballot. That's not a crazy, extreme, or partisan thing to say. And so I'll continue to work to make sure that people in this community have that opportunity and go out and exercise their ability to do that. There are a number of things I think that can happen in order to work to make sure that people go and vote. I think first and foremost, we got to instill this in people when they're young, in terms of civics in school. I used to do, when I was in high school, I used to do the morning announcements. That's why some folks probably say I have a face for radio. So I used to do the morning announcements, and one of the things I thought, even back then, like to engage kids or to make them pay attention to the announcements, is do something where we voted. I mean, you could do something even, in schools where, the dessert at lunch could be determined by a vote, and that'll help to get some of our will be voters engaged, right, and let them know the importance of casting a ballot and what would happen on the other side of that. If it's ice cream or broccoli, right? I mean, that's you know what I mean, like that engages them. So you can do things like that. I think that regardless of whatever party were to do this, I mean, there are registered voters out there that simply just did not show up to the polls. Maybe there's some sort of autopsy that's done that says, that reaches out to those folks and says, hey, you've taken the time, the energy, and the effort to register to vote, but you didn't cast a ballot. Why is that? And not only why is that, but what would motivate you to actually go and do that? So whether it's actions when folks are younger, and I took my kids, my daughters, to vote with me early this past election, and I let them press the screen for me, and they were, I tell you, even when we see residual campaign commercials, the day after the election, they were still really, really excited to see candidates that they had pressed the button for, that they had voted for. You're starting young, you keep things up like that in school and other things, like this sort of autopsy of reaching out to folks to engage with them and why they did not vote. I think we could find out and boost those numbers up.
Okay, so we're going to kind of bookend our conversation around budget. Steve got to talk about strategic planning, and eyes rolled to the back of people's heads. We're going to talk a little bit about budget and some other, but there is probably nothing that's more important to where things are going. You're most of the way through the process. In fact, your process pretty much is done when it comes to the budget. Just talk a little bit about where things stand, the things that you vetoed, what your feeling is on what the Common Council potentially will do around those, and just give people a sense of where things stand with that.
So I introduced in September a budget that was $1.7 billion for our spending plan in 2023. Delivered that budget to the Common Council all through October. The Council and their Finance and Personnel Committee had the opportunity to review the budget and make potential changes to the budget. They've done that. They submitted an amendment that would siphon some money away from American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA dollars, that my intention is to use in the future for future budgets to limit the negative impact of those future years, and put us in a worse position if they were to do that. So their desire is to increase spending to restore some of the funding cuts to libraries and the fire service. And I don't want to see those things cut. When I look at the Journal Sentinel and I see the stories of people who use the MLK library, which I used as a kid growing up when I lived in that neighborhood too. And I hear people talking about the library as a safe space, a place for students who need a quiet spot to study, who are just trying to do well. So you have folks who go to the library to apply for jobs. It pains me to make these cuts, but absent additional revenues, this is the path that the city, and not just the city of Milwaukee, but Milwaukee County and other local governments throughout the state are on. And so my view is that in order to meet that future, that we're trying to avert, right? But in order to meet that future as it stands right now coming towards us, we need to budget prudently, right? And there have been these conversations. I know that many people in this room have probably heard this, many years going back, that, there's this budget reckoning that's coming in Milwaukee, right? There's a problem that is brewing. And I've inherited a situation where the storm is here. In the next couple of years, you're going to see drastic cuts. Sometimes, some folks would even probably say draconian cuts in services in Milwaukee. And I don't want to do that, but those are the cards that I'm dealt. And we've got to budget prudently to make sure that we're easing ourselves into that future reality that all of us know is coming. And that's what I'm attempting to do. So the council worked to reverse some of the cuts. They said, hey, we can find the money to fund it now. My thing is that, look, you can find the money to fund some of those services now, but in the future years, not the future years, but next year, that means it'll be an even bigger cut than what I'm proposing today. So rather than having this huge drop off, let's sort of ease into it. And so, the council has my veto, and so we'll see what they do at their next meeting coming up on Tuesday.
Just to put a little finer point on that, the city, if I'm not mistaken, got about $403 million. Is that the amount that we got in ARPA?
394.
Okay, I was off by 10.
I got you.
But those are, in some ways, that's the last line of defense for what these really draconian cuts are doing. The money has to be obligated by the end of 2023 or 2024. But you're using that to stave off what would otherwise be the really, the worst things we'd have to do today, right? I mean, and just to give people a sense, that's really the last leverage that you have in terms of new other program, any revenue to contribute there.
Yeah, the bag of tricks has run out. They've been run out. The only reason that we're in a position to keep things afloat as they have been the past few years is because we got this windfall of funds from the federal government. That's probably unlikely to happen again. And if it were not for that, we'd already be facing, these really draconian cuts. But since I have been a principal leader in city government as council president now, as mayor, we've been working to responsibly use those funds to keep our operations running with as minimal impact to citizens, while also preparing for the inevitable, well, hopefully not inevitable, but the future that is forecasted for us to come. And by the way, when President Biden was here on Labor Day, he was on stage and he said, hey, we extended these funds to local governments, and cities have used the funds the right way. You're keeping your operations going. You're making sure that you're funding your local services. That's exactly what we've been doing in Milwaukee.
All right, let's talk about an issue that I think probably keeps you up at night. It's on everybody's mind: crime, reckless driving. There was some criticism leveled on you for your budget because you reduced, well, I don't think you reduced spending, you reduced the head count in MPD through your budget. And one of the questions that came in, I think, from one of our members is, how do you justify that? I mean, you put some context around it already about where things are going, but what is it that, and beyond that, then, what are your strategies after that about what are we doing and how are we doing to reduce crime in Milwaukee?
Yeah, and excuse me, and I appreciate the criticism. Look, there is not one department in city government that would not have loved to see a $20 million increase in their budget. Every department would have liked to see it. None of them got it except for one, the Milwaukee Police Department. And that was in the budget that I presented. So I take public safety very, very seriously in Milwaukee. Now, unfortunately, even with a $20 million increase in their budget, it doesn't buy me more police officers. And it doesn't buy me more police officers because if you rewind the tape, going back to 2010, 2011, there was this very controversial at the time piece of legislation that was passed and signed by the governor at the time called Act 10. And Act 10 took away the bargaining rights of local government employees to bargain for wages and benefits and the like. Now that has created some benefit to cities across the state. We've been able to keep costs low. But what Act 10 did not do was subject those same measures to police and to fire. So those city employees, unlike other city employees, have been able to bargain for better wages and benefits and the like, and those are the biggest drivers of our costs. And so while some employees have not had a raise essentially for a decade, police and fire, their costs have continued to climb. They've continued to climb, continue to climb. So I've put more money into the police department, but unfortunately it's not buying me more officers. And I'd love to buy me more officers, but we're just not at that point. So that's why I keep saying that I need the state to be the partner that it promised to be years ago. As a case in point, if you go back to the year 2000 in terms of state shared revenue, the state of Wisconsin delivered enough money back in a single pot to the city of Milwaukee to pay for the entirety of the police department budget, which is our largest budget expenditure. In that same pot of money, we had enough money to pay for the entirety of the Milwaukee Fire Department. In that same pot of money, we also had about $25 million that we could use to invest in local priorities, in roads or infrastructure, or, I mean, today it could be lead pipes, right? It could be internet access. It could be making changes to our roadways to address reckless driving. Today, in shared revenue, we don't even get enough to cover police. It's less than 80% of police funding. So it's not a local problem or my hesitance to fund police. I want to fund police. Unfortunately, the state only gives me so much money and only allows me so many tools to raise the revenues necessary to support that function. So it's not a local level issue, it's a state level issue, and one that we're trying to fix.
Yeah, and in some ways, the real dollar numbers that you're getting are exactly the same, if not less, in that shared revenue. It's not like the costs have gone up, markedly there.
Correct.
You mentioned.
Can I just
go ahead?
Because
your time.
Because you're look at that. And you're right about the real dollar issues. If shared revenue had been increased just at the rate of inflation from 2000 to 2022, the city of Milwaukee would have received this year $155 million more from the state than what we did. Right now we receive, actually in real dollars, less than what we got back in the year 2000. And to note on top of that, the budget shortfall, the gap that we had is about $151 million. So do the math. $155 million if shared revenue had been kept at the rate of inflation, and our budget hole this year is $150 million. You see where the problem is.
Yep. So a number of us, I think, are seeing some evidence of the efforts that you're doing. You mentioned the street diet, those types of things. Can you give us a sense of where those things stand? You're compromised for resources, but what else are we doing? Where will we be seeing that? I know there have been some resources that have been able to be deployed towards that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to say this because unfortunately it's not getting as much play as I would hope. It's not getting as much play as I'm certain the chief of police would hope. And I say it every chance that I get, but somehow it doesn't make the clip. In that crime in Milwaukee, although we still have problems, I'm not jumping for joy because there are problems that we still have to address, and we're working diligently to address them, but crime in Milwaukee is down some 14% from the time that I took office, or from this time last year. So with the things that we've implemented since I've been mayor and Jeff Norman has been police chief, we're driving crime down. So we're headed in the right direction, and that's good. And that's accountable for a number of reasons. In the year 2022 and 2022, we know that it's not just police, right? It's not just police that can solve this issue on their own, right? It takes multiple sources. I mean, that's why Shaitania Brown came up here and talked about Camp Rise, which the reason that I called Shaitania on that Saturday is because I had seen a news story about kids who were asked a question. How many of you have seen or been involved in an incident where somebody had stolen a car or some violent sort of incident? And every single one of those kids raised their hand. And these are the kids who grew up in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. And I said, we cannot go through another summer where we don't address this, or we don't try to address it and have earlier interventions in the lives of young people. So that's when I called Shaitania, and I called Governor Evers, and I called Earl Ingram from Voices of the Elders, and I called Dr. Posley at Milwaukee Public Schools, and in 30 days, Shaitania and her team turned this program around and got it working, servicing a group of kids that ordinarily they wouldn't even touch until they turned 14 years old. That's how that started, because it's a violence prevention program. Then there's also the Office of Violence Prevention, which in its name, folks would imagine that, hey, you can use that office and prevent all violence. That is but a tool of many to work to address the issue. It can't, of and by itself, prevent all violence in Milwaukee, right? So we have to keep that in the back of our mind. There's education as well. There's Milwaukee Police Department that we've been working with. In terms of reckless driving, there are changes to the roadway that we're embarking on. If you go to a number of neighborhoods across Milwaukee, you'll see new concrete that's poured, whether it's pinned-on curb extensions, whether it's speed humps, whether it's traffic circles, whether it's road diets, whether it's improved bike lanes with the traffic parked on the outside, which makes it safer for the bicyclists, but having that traffic parked on the outside becomes a mitigating factor for folks who want to drive recklessly as well. There are a number of things we're working on to address crime in Milwaukee. I championed, and it was passed, a new policy that allowed the police to utilize technology sort of like an Uber for tows. And so if they pull somebody over who's driving recklessly, they can basically go on an Uber app and get a tow truck to come quickly, because otherwise it was taking like 3-4 hours for the tow truck to come. Now they get the tow truck and they get the vehicle towed away. So you're driving recklessly in Milwaukee, that happens. We've towed over 100 vehicles, and if you don't present the proper credentials and get insurance and retrieve your vehicle, then guess what? Then we get to destroy the vehicle. We're suing people as well who drive recklessly in Milwaukee and putting those folks on notice too. So we're implementing a number of different initiatives in order to address crime in the city. And I think we're headed in the right direction.
So moving along to the issue of education, you're a product of MPS. Everybody agrees that our school system is critically important to what the future workforce looks like. How do you define success in schools? How do you, as mayor, what should your role be? There's a continuing community discussion about what the role of the mayor should be. What do you see it as, and how do you play a role in making sure that what we all know is it unacceptable results now across the education spectrum get better?
Yeah, people will make decisions to have kids in Milwaukee, to move to Milwaukee, to move away from Milwaukee, to start a business in Milwaukee, to grow a business. I mean, all these things based on the system of education. And I know that, all right? And to me, I'm not just a product of Milwaukee Public Schools, but I'm the mayor in a city where we've got these three sort of entities in education. And they've been around for more than 30 years, whether it's public schools, whether it's charter schools, or whether it's private schools where students attend on a voucher. I'm not interested in continuing this war because these things are here. They haven't gone anywhere yet. It's unlikely that they will go anywhere. So we all have to, my view is that we have to make do with what we got and improve the situation for kids all around. I'm mayor of this whole city. I'm not mayor just of, just for kids in Milwaukee Public Schools, which again, I'm a graduate of, and I've got 3 kids. I've got a 12-year-old son who's in 7th grade, and I've got 4-year-old twin daughters who are in K4. All of them are in Milwaukee Public Schools, right? But down my block, I'm sure there are kids who attend a private school or attend a charter school. But I'm mayor for all these kids. And it's my responsibility to make sure on my end that I am tackling the issues outside the school building to make sure that they're in the best position to go in that school building, to learn, to become productive, contributing members to our city. That's what my role, that's what my responsibility is as mayor, and that's what I'm going to keep fighting for in this job.
So, yeah. I think there's a number of people in the room who are working with business leaders in the community, others who are driving. You recognize there are these three separate systems, and MPS students, public school kids get a certain amount, charter and choice kids get a lesser per pupil amount, and there's an effort to, if not make those equal, at least kind of start to shrink that gap. Do you have any perspective on going to the legislature there, or whether, what you might feel about that in the next session of the legislature?
I'm hearing, some of those conversations. I ran for mayor, not for school board. I ran for mayor, not for, state assembly. So I don't know all the particulars there. All I know is that families are making decisions about whether they're going to go to public school, whether they're going to private school, whether they're going to go to a charter school. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, all of these kids need access to a great quality education. Because my view is this, is that we're going to pay for all these kids one way or the other. We're going to pay for all these kids one way or the other. Either we're going to pay for them on the front end by making good investments in their education and in programs like Camp Rise and in Earn and Learn, and making sure they have access to programs in the Boys and Girls Club, or like when I was a kid, the YMCA or Silver Spring Neighborhood Center, you name it, or we're going to end up paying for them on the back end. Now, my older brother is the warden at the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility. And I love my brother to death, and I want him to have a good career and a good living and all that. But ideally, I'd like to put him out of business, because we've made these investments on the front end that there's not the need to send folks there. And I see it, again, on both sides. Again, my brother is the warden there, but I've had times in my life, and it may be true even now. I haven't checked the inmate rolls presently, but one of my older brothers has been and may presently be his inmate. So I see it on both sides. Somebody who got the investment and was committed to the investment in education, and now he's a warden, and one who didn't have that sort of access, and he's been in and out of prison basically since he was able to go. And I don't want that future for kids in Milwaukee.
Amen. Moving to real estate development and economic development, congratulations, Fiserv. The Fiserv announcement, I think, is great for everybody. I think we all agree that what's happened in and around the old Grand Avenue is the best chance at long-term success that has had probably in 40 years. But you still have a very much of a changing real estate environment in the downtown, near downtown area. COVID has had an impact. People working more at home, working remotely. Just what do you see? Do you see more of some of the office towers transitioning to residential? Is that something that, what are you hearing about the overall real estate market and things downtown?
A mix of both, right? I mean, and thank you on the congratulations of Pfizer. My team over at the Department of City Development have been working nonstop. I've been working nonstop with not just the property owner, but also with Fiserv in order to ink that deal. And so I'm happy that of all the locations around the world that Fiserv could have gone to, they've got a huge presence in Georgia. They've got a huge presence, out east in New York, New Jersey. They've got a huge presence in Nebraska. They chose to stay here. And we worked very diligently to make sure that they did stay here. So I'm very pleased that happened. And we're going to continue to work to draw those sort of opportunities here to Milwaukee. I mean, again, going back to me being a principal leader, not always as mayor, but even as council president, we able to do the same thing by pulling the opportunities at Milwaukee Tool here to Milwaukee as well. We were able to work to get the couture out of the ground, even though it had run into some headwinds at City Hall. We were able to fight through those and get things done. So I want to continue to see more business development, more office development downtown. But to your point, you are seeing some transitions. I know that at 100 East Wisconsin, right? That building, or at least parts of it, the idea is to transition some of that into apartment buildings. And I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing, because what that'll do is add more people living downtown. Living in a place like that is good for businesses around. They're bringing those dollars here. They're circulating those dollars in the economy downtown. They're strengthening businesses, which creates opportunities for more jobs. And when you have more people milling about, even if they're just walking up and down the street or having coffee outside of a coffee shop, it creates dynamism, it creates vitality, it creates energy in a city, and that's what I want to see.
Okay, so we just had an election last week. There'll be another one in the spring, but you have to run for re-election in 18 months. Some people probably are starting that campaign now. What do you want to be judged on? What is it that you think are the things that you want to be judged on when you run for, assuming you decide you're running for re-election? What are the things that people in this room, people in the community ought to be judging Chevy Johnson on for how you have done?
Well, what should people judge me on in it's not news yet, Joel, but I'll make some news here that I intend to run for re-election. What should folks judge me on? I think they should judge me on the things that I said I was going to work to do when I initially ran for this job. I said I wanted to have a city that was stronger, that was safer, that was more prosperous for everybody. And we touched on some of the prosperity with Pfizer coming to town. Even though it was before I was mayor, but I'm still taking credit for Milwaukee Tool, because if I were not council president, that wouldn't have happened. I'm taking credit as well for the couture that's coming out of the ground, because 40% of the hours worked on that will go to people who live in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, the challenged neighborhoods that I grew up in here in this city, and it'll present a pathway for them to have family supporting careers in the union construction trades, right? That is an incredible field for citizens in Milwaukee to have a family supporting job in. I just want that to be known, and we have to continue pushing towards that. So we're working on the prosperity piece. We're working to make sure more people have access to resources to own homes. We talk about strength for the city. I am working day in and day out with you, with our other partners, to draw more revenues to the city of Milwaukee. And we haven't crossed the finish line presently, but I tell you, we are closer than we've been in probably 20 years at getting more resources here to keep our services running at a way that our citizens expect and quite frankly deserve. So that, and in terms of safety, I just touched on the fact that since I've been mayor, we're driving crime down in Milwaukee. It's down some 14% year to date. We got a lot of work to do to keep driving it down farther, but I am going to continue to do that. Chief Norman's going to continue to do that. And it's all about partnership. That's what I keep saying. It's about partnership. It's about working together. So if you judge me on the things that I said that I wanted to do when I came into this job, when I ran for this job, having a city that's safer, that's stronger, that's more prosperous, I would think that I would win re-election.
Time will tell.
We will see.
All right, a little bit of a lightning round here, because part of the GMC's origin story and throughout its history has been around capital projects and the built environment. I'd want to just talk to you about a couple of things that are, either being talked about or are potential things around the built environment, and just get your perspective on it. Demolition of I-794. We've seen in the last few weeks some, really striking some visions of what that might look like. Where do you stand on that, and what do you think about that, prospects of that for the future?
How do you look at Park East being gone and what's there presently. The Deer District, Pfizer Forum, a new hotel going up right now, other development that's going to happen, down the line, and not think, what if, So I'm certainly interested in having the conversation to see what the possibilities are.
Stadium freeway demolition, mainly the north end. I know but if you want to weigh in on what the DOT just came out with in the last few days about the preferred alternative for that east-west, but as much as anything, the kind of the restoration of more of a residential feel to the north spur of the stadium freeway. What do you think about that?
On the north spur of the freeway, look, I said where it makes sense. We should look at removing freeways. I mean, that happened years ago with the Park East. I am supportive of the effort to study and hopefully ultimately remove the north leg of the stadium freeway there. There's another spur that was in my old aldermanic district on the northwest side that I think could possibly be looked at and could spur new opportunities for growth and development as well. So I'm interested in looking at all those things. We had a lot of stokes in the fire with DOT, especially around this issue of reckless driving, right? When you think about streets like Capitol Drive, when you think like streets like National Avenue and the like, these streets are technically state highways that traverse the city, but they operate as highways like they do when they go into Waukesha County. You can't have those sort of roads operate in a densely populated urban area like Milwaukee the same way as they would in a sparsely populated location far flung from the city. It's got to be different. And so we're working with the DOT to get them to understand that and pushing them towards that vision that I talk about, where we talk about having people-centered development. And that's what I want to get to.
All right. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about, like a hobby of yours. You said Batman, but professional. I've got on my notes here professional wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
It's a hobby. Apparently not you to participate, but you're a big fan of that. Just let people know a little bit about, where does that passion come from?
Well, when I was 3, my father tells me that he sat me on his lap and we watched the Saturday night's main event. And I guess I've just been a fan ever since, especially when I got to be, a middle schooler. They say girls gossip, the boys gossip too. We'd be at the lunch table and, all the boys would be talking about what happened on Monday Night Raw, especially during the Attitude Era with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and, The Undertaker and Mankind and my favorite, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, And I've just been a fan ever since. It's great entertainment. It's like one of the last variety shows out there. Like you got, a music concert, you got pyrotechnics, you got athleticism, you got comedy, you got drama. It's all rolled into one show. And for somebody that doesn't have a lot of time for TV these days, I could sit down, even with my kids on a Friday night and get all those things in one. So I'm a big fan and have attended a number of events here in Milwaukee and across the country as well. Actually, I got my first job. I got my first job at the YMCA so I could earn enough money so that I could buy tickets for my best friend and I to go to WWE events in Milwaukee. So that's how I got into the workforce, is wrestling. That's why I'm here, is because of...
Is there any truth to the rumor that some of those people will be coming to campaign for you when you run for re-election? Now, since you made that note.
I hope so.
All right, a little bit lighthearted, but then serious. Who's the best dancer in your household? I think we all know. Your wife just won the coveted gold ball a couple of weekends ago, right?
Yes. So Cristo Rey Jesuit High School, as a fundraiser for the school, does this Milwaukee Stars merengue. It's a dance competition, and they asked me to do it, and I promptly said no, because I can't dance at all. They say you have 2 left feet. I actually have 3. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they asked about Dominique doing it, and she is great. And no, don't get me started up here about her. Then I'll start to cry. She's amazing, and she actually won first place, and so she took home the mirror ball. Yeah.
So, and the serious part of that is when you're mayor, when you're in a public role like this, your whole family is part of it. You've done it now for the last nearly a year, elected, more than 6 months ago. Just talk a little bit about are you able to insulate the family? Are they coming along? What do you feel like the job has meant to them or the influence it's had on them?
You're right that we all do serve, and it was actually just at one of the Veterans Day celebrations that I was at this past Friday, where this colonel who had been involved with the armed forces for 40 years, his wife was with him, and he talked about the wife putting up with him for all these years as he went and did this service to the country. And I started to think about it, and he mentioned this statistic that I knew, but seeing his wife there with him just really brought it home to me that there's, in the military at least, only 1% of Americans who actually sign up to serve and protect all of us. And I'm not doing anything nearly as incredible as they are, but you think about that in terms of my job is also a service job. There's very few of us who sign up to say, hey, I'm going to be mayor, and deal with the stresses and the long hours and being away from your family and missing things. And so there is a sacrifice that not only you as a candidate or an office holder has, but your family has too. And I do try to isolate them as in the areas where I can, but there are some perks and privileges that I like to make sure that they're exposed to say thank you, right? So this Friday, for instance, we're having the 109th Christmas tree lighting, which I think will be a fun family event. One of the things I wanted to do as mayor, one of the first acts was to get the Christmas tree from out of the corner by the parking garage and have it on full display. And so we're going to have it, we're partnering with the Bucks, and we're going to have it at the Deer District for everybody to see in Milwaukee. And so I'm going to have my family at that. And I think that my kids will be able to enjoy it. But there are a lot of times when I come home at night and my kids are asleep and I don't get to see them. I drop them off all at school in the morning and then I don't see them again. And many times there are days where that happens, or they're awake for only 10 minutes and I don't even get the chance to read them a book to send them to sleep. So there certainly are sacrifices, and even before I got this job as council president, talking about my commitment to public safety, after the murder of George Floyd, the city was in line to receive a federal cops hiring grant, and because of the time, it became very, very controversial. Usually they would go through without a hitch. This time it was really, really controversial, and I was council president. The grant was defeated, but I know the importance of public safety, so I worked to resurrect the grant. And I had protesters outside of my house, sometimes 50 cars deep, blaring music, banging at my door late at night, scaring my kids, scaring my wife. And that was hard for them. So there are a lot of challenges that not just, me as, again, the office holder, but your family has to go through as well. So there are good things, but there are also very challenging things as well.
All right, we're going to finish up by talking a little bit about what we're going to be doing together with the GMC and the city. First of all, I have a question to ask you. This is the budget address. The first line of a budget address was this: how we fund local government in the state of Wisconsin is broken. Do you know whose budget address that was?
Mayor of Mugwanago.
I think it's Muskego. Rick Petfalski, maybe it's Mugwanago, but I think the bottom line is that it's not just the city of Milwaukee that understands that the challenges that we have are not just around expense, but are the relationship with state government and that shared revenue program. And so, we continue to be part of that, the coalition. But let's go back. Some months ago, you and your staff approached the GMC about, looking at how the city could go about operating more efficiently. Do you want to kind of take over a little bit of the conversation from there, and then I'll fill in the blanks?
Sure. So you're right, and we've kind of discussed the dire financial situation that the city finds itself in. And not just the city, but whether it's Maguanago or Muskego, I'm sure both of those places that end and go are going to have similar sort of problems or issues. So we want to work with the GMC and its members to find ways for the city to be more efficient. We've worked to belt tighten over the years. We've done a number of things, including cutting a number of staff, improving the safety of the workplace to cut down on claims of employees being hurt at work and having the payouts there, a number of different things. But we're interested in working with the GMC. So can you tell me, how can the GMC work with us to make sure that we're in a position to make sure that we're doing everything that we can, we're crossing the T's, we're dotting the I's to be as efficient as possible?
And so over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, we've, starting with those conversations, we've interviewed consultants. I think everybody needs to understand fundamentally, as the mayor has said and as others have expressed, the challenges that the city of Milwaukee has are fundamentally revenue challenges, and because of a 110-year-old contract with state government, the purse strings there are generally held by state government. And but it's only good practice that the city should, from time to time, go through and see how they're operating. So what we have done is talk to national consultants about how can the city go through and do a top-to-bottom operational review. And it's something that, if the city had its own resources to do, what you would probably do, it's good practice to do. But because resources are constrained, we're on the verge of choosing a consultant to do that. This is going to cost several $100,000. We have gotten commitments working with the mayor. We've gotten commitments for more than half of that. This will start in the beginning of January. There will be community involvement in this, and I think it will solve. And then I'll ask you to weigh in. I think it does a couple things. It gives you an opportunity to see what you have to work with. In the worst set of circumstances, if we don't get some help from Madison, we're hugely challenged no matter what. But even if we're able to get through a sales tax or through some other means, some additional revenue into the city of Milwaukee, none of that has you sitting fat and happy. You're still going to be operating out of scarcity. So this will allow the city to truly understand where resources need to be spent in the city, how can you operate most effectively, and then how can you deliver services most efficiently. So we'll be launching that. So you made news by announcing you're running for re-election. I hope it's going to be newsworthy that the business community and the membership of the GMC are supportive of the city trying to find every way possible to operate as efficiently as possible. But I also hope that it sends the right signal to the business community here, to the state legislature, that this mayor, the city is going to operate differently than we ever have before. So I let you kind of take it from there.
Great, and I appreciate that. And as my first proposed budget indicates, I am interested in doing that. I am interested in finding efficiencies and making hard choices, where hard choices are necessary to make sure that our services run as smoothly as possible. We're still delivering a quality service to the citizens that all of us serve. But we can't do it alone right now. We just, as Joel mentioned, we're just not in a position where we can expend these funds to do this. So that's why it's important to go back to that key word that I often use, is partnership. And working together with you all in order to make sure that we're finding the spaces, finding the places where perhaps we haven't even looked, to continue to belt tighten as we prepare for this future that we're trying to reduce the risk of in terms of working with the state to bring more revenues in, but one that we have to prepare for regardless, because we should be working to make sure that we operate in a more efficient manner. And so that's where I'm happy to partner with Joel and with all of you in order to make that future a reality for us at the city.
One last thing for you. Everybody here, I think, are supporters of you. They're supporters of the mayor's office, champions of the city. What are the things that we collectively can do to be most supportive moving forward? Whether it's on the coalition that we're part of or other things, what are the things in the next several months that the people assembled here can do?
And thank you for that. I think, again, if you have not signed up or you're not part of that coalition, to encourage legislators at the state level to help us with these issues that we face, not just in the city of Milwaukee, not just in Milwaukee County, but in communities, large and small throughout the entire state. Please sign up and do that. Please be a part of that effort. We really need all the firepower that we can get, not just from people who are in elected positions like me, but from business leaders and nonprofit executives throughout the community, because your employees or the people that you serve, they too depend on these services, right? So all of us should be in this asking for these resources together. So please sign up for that. And Shaitania gave, again, this great presentation on Camp Rise. Again, as I said, we're going to pay for kids one way or the other. That's by making investments on the front end or making investments in paying for, in a much more expensive way, for them on the back end in the penal system and the correction system. I'd rather do the investment on the front end as opposed to the back end. And so, if you are willing and able, please reach out to Shaitania. Please reach out to Employ Milwaukee so that you can support that program. We talked about a number of things that I'm very, very proud of since I've been a not just mayor, but a principal leader in Milwaukee, whether it's Couture or Milwaukee Tool or some of the investments that we're making to tackle this quality of life issue and reckless driving, or being able to secure Pfizer here in Milwaukee. But Camp Rise, that program is going to be the thing that I'm most proud of, I believe, whenever the time comes that I leave office. I may not get reelected in 24, I don't know. But if I do get reelected in 24 and it's many years from now, I'll be able to point to that and say we made a real investment in the lives of young people in this city, and that ultimately is what it's all about. So both of those things, whether you're doing the touch base to work with legislators, or you're making an investment in a program like that that benefits kids in this community, those are things I'd ask you to consider making an investment in.
And I would also just say, as a matter of thanks, there are a number of GMC members, leaders, community leaders who have already invested in this operational review that we're going to be doing. So the GMC will be the client on behalf of the city. Rob Henkin and the Policy Forum will work closely with us. They are, to my way of thinking, and I think the mayor agrees, really unparalleled in their unbiased ability to provide data and to provide leadership around these things. So this will be a community-wide effort over the next few months. But we're not all the way there yet, so a few more phones may ring in the next few days about how we can make that happen. Do you want to have the last word? I get the job of adjourning the meeting once we're done, but any other final comments for you before we go?
I don't want to curse my ability to have the last word before the council meeting on Tuesday, so I'll let you have it.
Again, I appreciate everybody's involvement, the questions that were submitted in advance, the work that you continue to do on our behalf. There is no meeting in December, so we'll meet again at the beginning of January. There's a lot of work that's ongoing around our strategic planning and a lot of work that's going on in the organization and the community between them. But since we don't have a chance to get together before January, I would wish everybody the greatest of holiday seasons. I think after a long period of real challenging times, there's starting to be some more hopefulness in the air, and the holiday spirit can capture that. So I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. And thank you. With that, our meeting's adjourned.